gatherers. It's not as if our hunter-gatherer forebears would suddenly stumble upon a wheat field and then begin making pizza. So when I say that we've been consuming wheat for 10,000 years, that might seem like a long time. But in reality, that means that for more than 99.9% of the time that we've walked this planet, we've been wheat-free and gluten-free. And that's important because our genes, our DNA is basically the same as it's been for the past 50,000 years, 70,000 years. And these are the genes that dictate what foods we can tolerate. And wheat is not one of them. And yet, wheat products make up 20% of the calories that we now consume, with devastating consequences. The wheat that people consumed in biblical times is in no way representative of the wheat that people consume today. The wheat that we consume today is the subject of aggressive hybridization, creating a product that our physiology just cannot accept, cannot recognize, cannot process, and this leads to some real problems. When you challenge your body with foods that it cannot recognize, it leads to inflammation, and inflammation is the cornerstone of brain degeneration. And this is why I treat my Alzheimer's patients by putting them on a gluten-free diet. And that means not just wheat, but all foods that contain gluten. And they are everywhere in the modern Western diet. I did mention that wheat makes up 20% of our calories. So when I'm in my office evaluating a patient with dementia, one of the first things I do is a blood test for gluten sensitivity. And we get positive results every single day. And I have to say that these days, I'm quite likely to put every one of my patients on a gluten-free diet. Now that I understand that, in fact, all humans may be sensitive to this protein. You know, each day as I'm seeing patients in my office who have dementia, it's a big part of what I do, they're typically brought from other cities around the country and even sometimes from other countries by their loved ones. And more often than not, after I've completed the evaluation, when I'm walking down the hall, the concerned children will pull me aside and say, "Doc, I don't want to end up like Mom or Dad. What should I be doing?" I get that question virtually every single day because they see the devastating effects. Robert Kennedy once said that some men see things as they are and ask why, and others see things as they could be and ask why not.
Mario,
it's good enough to tell these family members that we just don't know what causes this disease. There's really not much that can be done. That isn't fair. It isn't reality, and it's not up to speed with current science.
What you doing this
I
morning?
feel we owe it to society to raise the level of awareness of profound roles that gluten sensitivity and carbohydrates play
I'll talk to you later.
in terms of brain health.
All right.
Each morning I begin my day across the parking lot from my office. I visit an assisted living facility where my father, a former brilliant neurosurgeon, resides. And sometimes he may or may not remember my name. And when I come to visit with him, he's generally dressed, getting ready to make rounds to see his patients. Despite the fact that he retired more than 25 years ago. So again, I get it. I really get it. We've got to understand that gluten sensitivity, carbohydrates, and sugar represent a powerful brain threat. The most modifiable things we can do to preserve brain health and function. I've often found that when we're dealing with children and even adults with so-called ADHD, that these will also respond dramatically to a gluten-free diet. But medication is the go-to treatment for this disorder. And let me tell you about some of the very common side effects of these medications, including in children, stunting of their growth, appetite suppression, sleep disorders, nausea, and even the development of abnormal tics and twitches and what are called vocalizations. So what can we do from a nutritional and even a preventive medicine perspective so that we're not putting people, including our children, on brain-altering amphetamines the long-term consequences of which we do not even understand. Several years ago,
Oh, we know.
a mother brought her
Zombies.
to me, and she told me he's ADHD.
Walking
And did you catch
dead.
that? Not that he had ADHD, he was the problem. She explained that at times he would shake uncontrollably when he was frustrated. He couldn't stay on task and had anger outbursts. Now, mind you, the kid is 4 years old. What are the tasks that a 4-year-old has that he has to devote himself to? So what did we do? Well, we put Jeremy on some probiotics. You've heard of them. They're very common. Good bacteria. But the most important thing we did was replace Jeremy on
Not antibiotics.
2 weeks later,
Bio
the
means
telephone
life.
rings
Anti
at
is
home. The school
no
called
life,
the parents
really.
and thanked the parents for medicating their child. He wasn't medicated. Now I'm really going to fess up, because I would have likely been a strong candidate for prescriptions when I was Jeremy's age. In fact, I actually still have my report card from the first grade. And as you see here, I got a lot of checks. A check is an indication of a problem, and I got lots of them. I got checks for things like not following directions, my poor study habits, first grade, problems with self-control, and they actually, to my report card, had to add a category for cafeteria, which is apparently where I did my best work. But at least it looks as if I was dependable. But here's the clincher. This is what the teacher had to say about me. David is capable of better work if he would settle down to more controlled behavior. These days, you know what that means? It means medicate. But the profound relationship of gluten sensitivity to brain health and function goes well beyond things like dementia and ADHD. I mentioned before that about 10% of American adults suffer from depression. And what is the current treatment for depression? It is basically pharmaceutical. Take a pill or take many pills. And they're not necessarily even safe, especially for women. Women taking antidepressant medications are 45% more likely to have a stroke, and this is according to the Journal of the American Medical Association. Now, beyond that, their risk of death has increased 32%. Now, you can crunch the numbers any way you like, but no matter how you look at it, these are horrifying statistics. If food choices relate to mood and you could treat depression with what you eat or don't you think that should at least be considered? Absolutely. In fact, if you are depressed, your risk of being found to be gluten sensitive is increased by 230%. So what is the take-home message? If you or somebody you know is suffering from depression, whether or not they are on medication, consider testing for gluten sensitivity or simply try a gluten-free diet. And the science is there. Another reason people come to see me are for things called movement disorders. Now, these can be things like a simple tremor or more aggressive movement disorders where the arms and legs move called myoclonus, and things perhaps you're more familiar with like Parkinson's. Well, these movement disorders are actually very common, and over the past several years, I have had this opportunity in thinking about this to see many patients with movement disorders who actually
I know it is about to end in about a minute. I'm going to come back with another one.
Response to gluten.
Really want to stay in on this.
People whose lives were profoundly compromised by these movement disorders. The problem was in their daily bread, and I want to show you one example. This young man came to see me because of abnormal movement. He had been given a diagnosis of either having what's called an essential tremor or something called, or some bizarre muscle disorder they never really could put their finger on. And here's what they offered this young man. Either we'll inject all your arms and legs with Botox, or we'll give you a blood pressure pill in hopes of improving the tremor. I ended up doing some laboratory studies on this young man, and what did we find? We found that he was gluten sensitive. What did